Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Do You Believe? We're happy that you're here, that you're watching, and we welcome all your questions, your emails, your comments, everything. You'll see our information on the screen, so feel free to contact us. Francesca, we're happy you're here.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to hear your questions. And we also have Dr. Nagy Eskandar. How are you, Doctor?
I'm fine, thanks.
Dr. Nagy is a medical doctor, and he's the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons in England, and he practiced surgery for 25 years. And we're happy to have you and learn more about the body and biology and the five senses in this episode.
Exactly. So we discussed the vision, and we discussed the hearing, and we discussed the taste, and we discussed also the smell. And these are essential senses that will help us to recognize things and to enjoy life. If we miss one of them, really, we'll miss a big part of our enjoyment of life. There is another one, which is touch. And touch is very important and essential to have these receptors that can take the fine touch and the crude touch to tell us what is the nature of things that we are touching. Like I'm touching paper here. When I'm operating, I need to feel the touch of the tissues I'm dealing with. And touch is really essential in our body. I remember a friend of mine who was giving a lecture somewhere, and a lady came with her daughter, and the daughter lost the sense of touch. So the mother had to be very careful looking after this girl all the time, because she can touch fire and she doesn't realize it is fire, so she can hurt herself. So touch is a protective mechanism in our body, and it helps us to enjoy lots of things. So the five senses are essential for our enjoyment of life. Now, we have two possibilities. They come by chance or come by design. And I think when we saw the complication of the structure of all these five senses, I think the logical conclusion, it came by design. Let me show you on the screen this picture. So there are two possibilities of these five senses and all other complicated organs to come about. One is the materialistic or the atheistic view of the world, which is shown in the upper part of the screen here. It starts by the Big Bang, and in the Big Bang they say it is coming from something called singularity, which is energy and matter together in a small little singular point. And as we said before, when the energy and matter are concentrated and condensed as this singularity, the laws of physics will not work. So they need a miracle to start the Big Bang. And then when they started the idea of the Big Bang, they start to say it is 15 billion to 20 billion years when that happened. Then modified it now to 13.8 billion years. So you see the adjustment of time. We're talking billion, and billion is 1,000 million years. So this is not an accurate science, like when I go and check my hemoglobin in my blood, and they say this is 14 grams. That is operational science in the lab. And the figure, which I understand, and it is accurate. But all of this is based, in the Big Bang, is based on assumptions. And the assumptions change from time to time. And the figures change from time to time. So let us follow the idea of the Big Bang and how life started on Earth to see if that makes sense in the operational science or not. So in the upper part of the screen, we see the Big Bang. As I said, now 13.8 billion years. Then they believe that the different stars and star systems and galaxies formed between 10 and 12 billion years. And then the sun was formed about 5 billion years ago. And then the Earth was formed 4.6 or 4.5 billion years ago. And then they believe that 3.8 billion years ago, the water started to appear on Earth, and life started to appear in the water. And life comes from the water into the amphibians and to the moving into the Earth, and then the reptiles appear, and that is the dinosaurs. And they estimate that's 240 million years ago. I believe they are extinct about 65 million years ago. And then they believe that the dinosaurs became birds. and then the creeping animals, and then the common ancestor for apes, and then man came at the top. And they have different estimates for that. They think about 70,000 years ago to 120,000 years ago. That's the evolution story from the Big Bang into humans to the present age.
So because we have today the science that tells us that we can actually look at the fossils and look at that stuff and say that this was whatever, like carbon dating. Like, I mean, there's ways to figure that out. So if the lab is telling us it's millions of years, then why are we saying that it's not?
Exactly. This carbon dating and all the others actually is starting with assumptions to know the essential amount at the beginning. It depends on something called the half-life. So the half-life of carbon-14 changed to nitrogen-14. And the half-life is 5,730 years. So if you have a kilogram of carbon-14, after 5,730 years, it becomes half kilo and goes on and on and on. So it depends on the estimate they are using to assess this. And that has to have a carbon. So carbon-14 only measures something which contains carbon, organic matter, right? The carbon-14 is not an accurate assessment, and it measures only thousands of years. It cannot measure millions of years. And let me give you a little example. There was a paleontologist called Mary Schwartz. She was working on a bone of a dinosaur, and she found red blood cells and soft tissues. She said that cannot last for millions of years. That can only last for thousands of years. So she repeated the experiment again and again and again, and came to conclusion, this is hemoglobin, this is red blood cells, and this is elastic tissues. So her conclusion was, there must be a mechanism allowing these tissues to survive for millions of years, and she doesn't want to change her assumption that this is already thousands of years. So let me show you this video so you can hear from her exactly what she found and how she interpreted the facts that she's finding. Shall we see the video? Okay.
I'm not going to believe this. When she picked up a small piece to stop the reaction by putting it in water, it stretched and it springed and it moved all over the place. So we knew we had something pretty unusual.
It appears to be soft tissue. When they look at neighboring parts of the bone, they're even more surprised.
Out popped the blood vessels, and they were pretty incredible. And I said, I don't believe it, that's not possible. We need to do it again and again. It's one of those just goosebump-inducing scientific moments, that's all I can say. And they don't really happen very often.
Blood vessels should not exist in fossilized bone. Many scientists believe organic molecules can't last more than 100,000 years. Yet Schweitzer's bone is 68 million years old.
I think the presence of soft tissues and cells indicates there's a process going on that we didn't have a clue about. So I think it means that we have to kind of rethink the whole chemical process of making a bone turn into a fossil.
You see the point of this video. Dr. Schwartz found soft tissues in the specimen she's examining of a dinosaur bone. She believes that dinosaurs appeared 240 million years ago, and they were extinct 65 million years ago. So this bone, according to her estimate, should be more than 65 million years old. She found soft tissues which cannot survive more than thousands of years. She confirmed her operational experiment and proved these are soft tissues and these are blood vessels. But the way she interpreted these facts, she said there must be a mechanism which we don't know that allowed them to live 65 million years. So she doesn't want to change the scale of time. She wants to think of a mechanism which were never been described till now that allowed these tissues to survive for 65 million years ago. So what I'm trying to say here is all these radioactive elements estimate of time is based on assumptions. And the assumptions are really questionable in all of them. It is not like when I go and check my blood and it's 14 gram hemoglobin. It's completely different. And I'll show you on on the program, other specimens were taken from a mountain which was resulted as a result of eruption of a volcanic eruption. And we know that mountain was 12 years old, and they sent the sample, and it came as 300,000 years to 1.8 million years. So that's the range of error. We will discuss the radioactive material in detail in the future.
Right, great. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? So, Doctor, you believe that it hasn't been millions of years?
No, I don't believe that at all, because there is no evidence of it. It is based on assumptions, as I said, and we have big question marks on these assumptions. Actually, the idea of millions of years starts in geology, because they looked at the rate of precipitation and erosion of the mountains, and they said this same rate that's happening now happened in the past. That's a big assumption. That's called uniformitarian. So the uniformitarians believe that the same rate of deposition and erosion in the mountains are constant for the whole history of the Earth. So if you look at the crust of the Earth, if you look at the America, North and South, and Europe and Africa, you can really combine them together. This is called the tectonic plates. And they can really come together really as one unit. And if the distance, say, 5,000 miles, obviously this is not an accurate figure, I'm just saying, if it is 5,000 miles between the Europe and Africa in one side and America, North and South, and the tectonic plates, say, moving 1 meter a year, something. Of course, these are figures, it's not accurate at all. So they calculate, in order for that to happen, you need millions of years to happen. We believe in something different called catastrophic geology. When we study the flood of Noah, which lasted for 371 days, there was a volcanic eruptions and the fountains of the deep were opened. And as a result, the crust of the earth was disconnected or broken very quickly. It doesn't need the millions of years. You remember in Southeast Asia, there was a big tsunami. And in this tsunami, some islands moved within hours. It doesn't take millions of years. It depends on the force that's changing this island and moving it. If there is a volcanic eruption, that can happen very quickly. So we believe in catastrophic geology. The uniformitarian believe in the uniformity of the rates of change that never happened. And that's a big assumption.
So they mentioned, they mentioned in the video that the rock was a 65 million year old.
Yeah.
And then the bone that they found in the rock is I think by nature is a 65 million year bone. And then when you find the soft tissues, you can't walk away from the beginning assumption that the rock was 65 million.
Exactly.
So that's where you're saying that if you're going to start with that assumption, or I'm pretty sure based on specific scientific facts, that you're saying that this has been here for 65 million years, and then the bone, and then the soft tissue.
Exactly. And that's not matching the 65 million years ago. But she doesn't want to change the 65 million years. That's in her mind is constant. So she wants the operational science that she is examining, proving the soft tissues, to comply with the length of time that she's assuming. And that's the real battle of understanding. So the operation science is telling her that this is thousands of years. But her starting assumption, this is 65 million years. And that's the conflict here.
But doctor, isn't there also conflict with the Bible, that it doesn't have anything about dinosaurs listed in there? God created the living creatures, the crawling, creeping creatures,
That's right. That's
the
right.
humans, and the
Yes.
green things, the plants, right? So,
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, Francesca, and we'll discuss that in detail. But let me just answer that very quickly. Dinosaurs are reptiles, and the word dinosaur is a modern word which was introduced in 1841 by Charles Owen, and he described a big skeleton which belongs to reptiles. So the big dinosaur hatches from a small egg like a football size. So the big dinosaur, the T-Rex, starts as a little, like a little goat, and then grows up like a little elephant, and then a big elephant. So the idea of dinosaurs, as I said, they are reptiles. So according to the Bible, they are created with the creeping animals in day 6. And most of dinosaurs actually were eating herbs. They were not eating each other. The animals started to eat each other after the sin and the fall of Adam, according to the Bible. And there is a description of a creature like a dinosaur in the oldest book in the Bible called the Book of Job. And the Lord describes that big animal. He said his thighs and his legs are very strong, like brass. His tail is like the Caesar of Lebanon. And that's in Job chapter 40, if people want to go back and read the description. So the description of that creature, which Job had seen, because God is talking to him about something he understood at the time, is like Brachiosaurus, one of the types of the dinosaurs. So the word dinosaur was not mentioned in the Bible, but the description of a creature like a dinosaur was described. Like the word computer is not in the Bible because it's a modern word. So the Bible was translated into English in 1610 and 11, King James translation. And at the time, there was no word called dinosaur because it was introduced in 1841.
but doesn't the very existence of a dinosaur contradict with the Bible? Because as you were saying, even if we estimated that her process using the operational science that Dr. Schwartz used, if that was still incorrect, it would still be thousands of years ago, more than 6,000, like we see. Yeah.
Yeah, but that will move us from the millions to the thousands. And with the thousands, we'll come to the assumptions that they are starting with carbon-14. Carbon-14 starts, as I said, with assumption that the rate of change is constant. The initial amount of carbon-14, we know it, and then we can come to the conclusion. So the carbon-14 itself, when we bring it to the thousands of years, we'll start talking about the assumptions of carbon-14. Let me give you an example. We'll have a full session about radiometric dating and all of that, but let me just explain that. Diamond is carbon, and it's a very strong stone, so it doesn't accept contamination of carbon-14 coming into it because it's a very strong stone. Now, carbon-14, they say it is formed about 350 million years ago, according to the Uniformitarian understanding. The creationist scientists took samples of this diamond and sent it to ordinary laboratories, and they found traces of carbon-14. If you find traces of carbon-14 inside diamond, that means it is thousands of years, it is not millions of years. So what I'm trying to say here, all these radiometric assessments of age are based on assumptions. And when we'll discuss those assumptions, we'll find there is a major problem with all of these assumptions. We will discuss that in detail, but this is just a quick answer to your question. But your question is very logical, right? Yeah, it is thousands of years, but it is not the thousands of years of the Bible. I agree. But again, when we go deeper into carbon-14, we'll find that the assumptions need adjustment.
I look forward to hearing about that.
Okay, yes, we will do that, definitely, yes.
So if we're going to go back to that picture that we saw there, so it's going over millions of years, and that it was the first story, and then the Bible story.
Yes. Let me take you to the Bible story, and that's the second half of this screen that we are watching now. It starts by creation, which is creation from nothing, and it's only God who can create it from nothing, because the first law of physics says matter cannot create from nothing, and it cannot really be demolished. It can form one phase to another, like water, it can be vapor, and it can be ice, but always there is conversion of energy and matter. But in the creation week, this is a supernatural act of God that I cannot test in the laboratory. We should understand that. The creation act of God is supernatural. It happened once in the supernatural week of creation, the 6 days of creation, as the Bible described them. We'll talk about them in detail, but this is just the general idea of the biblical model. So we have the creation week, or 6 days and day of rest. And then on the 6th day, God created Adam and Eve on his image. So Adam and Eve were created in day 6, because some people think that Eve was created because it's mentioned in chapter 2 in Genesis in detail about the creation of Eve. They thought it is created after the week of creation. No, she was created on day 6. This is a minor detail. We'll come to that later. So they were given the freedom of choice, and they decided to obey God through the serpent, which was embodied or used by Satan to tempt them. And when they accepted the temptation of Satan, they disobeyed God and said, we will set the rules. God will not set the rules anymore. And I think that's the attitude in the 21st century again. Exclude God from the equation. He's never created. He's not existing. And we will set the rules. We will decide what's right and what's wrong. So that's what Adam and Eve did. And as a result, sin entered into the world. And the punishment of sin is death. And death has two dimensions. Spiritual death, separation from God, and a physical death that will take place. And this death happened in the life of Adam after 930 years of age. He died. And as we discussed in one of the episodes, we all die. The percentage of death anywhere in the world is 100%, but it happens in different stages. And we said we have two facts in life. We all have to pay taxes and we all have to die. And death is a reality. But the Christian faith offers us something very, very unique, because the Lord Jesus Christ died to kill the death, and he rose again, and he promised us eternal life if we believe in him and accept him as our own personal Savior. So back to the Bible events, the model of the creation. After the week of creation, and Adam and Eve and the freedom of choice, and sin entered the world, and decay and mutation and death entered the world, there was a big event called the flood of Noah after about 1600 years from creation, and the sin of man and women increased to the level that God is punishing the sin. He's not eliminating the sin, because sin happened after the flood again. So the flood was a universal flood, and God asked Noah to build an ark, and this ark is a wonderful structure. It can contain all the animals and birds that God brought to Noah to bring into the ark, and we'll talk about that in full detail, because in America, Answers in Genesis built a replica of Noah's ark, the full dimension, 300 feet by 50 by 30. And they built this wonderful exhibit in Cincinnati, in Williamson Town. And I had the pleasure of being there in the opening ceremony, and then I visited again, and we filmed all of that in Arabic, and hopefully be available soon on the media. So we will come to the ark, and we'll discover the size of the ark. Can it contain the animals? How can they survive for 371 days? The effect of the flood on the geology of the earth, the different layers, and the fossils. And then the Tower of Babel, and people were distributed. So we have two different models. They are incompatible with each other, and we have to decide which one we can believe in.
Well, thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Francesca, for being here. We'll come back to these two stories and to these ideas in the following episode. Stanley Kubrick said, never say no to an idea. You never know how that idea will ignite another idea. So think about your ideas. Think about what do you believe. We'll see you next time.